Hey everyone, welcome back to Paranormal Asia. Tonight's story is true, told across forums, tea shops, and family tables. It began on a rainy week in Yokohama when four lives brushed the border between the living and the listened to. Before the haunting, there were only habits, tired routines, and names. Our narrator is Hana, 28, a freelance translator who stays up late. Keiji, her older brother, fixes elevators. Mrs. Sato, the widowed neighbor, feeds strays. Yui, absent, was Hana's friend who vanished last spring. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there tonight? Tell me below, I'm listening tonight. Hana bites pens, saves receipts, and keeps a small altar for her grandmother with fresh salt and barley tea. She doesn't believe in curses, but she doesn't ignore them. Keiji trusts maintenance schedules. Mrs. Sato trusts incense. Yui once trusted everyone, and that tenderness became her mistake. A final mistake. The city sets the first terms. Typhoon drizzles become long veils, alley signs hiss, convenience stores hum with bright tired light. In Japan, people say names hold doors, say a name at the wrong hour, and something without a name may step through. Ushimitsu Doki favors those who ask softly then. Hungry Ghost Month wasn't on the calendar yet, but the seas felt hungry anyway. News carried small pieces about fishermen hearing voices before fog moved in. Priests advised common sense, keep altars clean, keep promises cleaner, and do not answer unfamiliar calls after midnight. If it insists, let it ring. Here's a simple rule anyone can understand. Some attention is an invitation. In many Asian traditions, a spirit does not need your fear, it needs your notice. Look too closely, speak without care, listen too long, and a trail forms between you. Tonight's story follows a trail made of names. Hana's apartment sits 4 floors up, opposite the mechanical room Keiji services monthly. The corridor smells like dust, old plastic, and lemon cleaner. Mrs. Sato lives 1 door down, with shoes lined neatly like waiting birds. Yui's mailbox still receives coupons. Someone forgot to cancel them, or didn't dare. Not yet. Act 1 begins like ordinary rain. Hana is behind on work. Keiji is covering a night shift. Mrs. Sato worries about a cat that won't return. The phone in Hana's kitchen, the old landline she keeps for emergencies, clicks at 12:03 a.m., then again as though practicing speech, to itself. She ignores the first call. The second leaves no message, only a breathing like the hallway when the elevator opens to no one. At her grandmother's altar, the salt has clumped into a small hill, as if something damp rested there. Outside, tires hiss through puddles, drawing lines, erasing them. In plain words for anyone new, many Japanese households keep butsudan, small family altars. Offerings of salt, tea, and incense maintain a polite boundary. When offerings sour, people talk about neglect, not horror. But neglect is a kind of door. Spirits, like drafts, find any door left less truly closed. Yokohama feels safe because danger arrives politely. Timetabled storms, predictable trains, warning chimes before doors close. Hana likes that. Rules mean kindness, but superstition threads through rules like wire in a fence. Don't whistle at night. Don't cut nails after dark. Don't say a lost person's name after midnight. Don't invite. A week earlier, Hana broke a rule without realizing. She posted Yui's name at 1:07 a.m., a late apology for missing a memorial gathering. The post ended with a plea. If you see this, message me. Messages travel farther than intended. Names too. Algorithms echo. So do rooms. At night. In the lobby stands a talisman board, a notice pinned by some anonymous hand. Sprinkle salt at thresholds. Avoid answering anonymous intercom buzzes. If a voice says your name from the stairwell, answer with a question, never a greeting. Anonymous advice makes brave neighbors. It also makes responsibility feel lighter. Mrs. Sato tells Hana gently that rain confuses the dead, too many reflections in puddles. She offers extra incense sticks and a square of paper to fold a protective knot. Hana smiles, accepts, returns to her desk. When the phone rings a 3rd time, she decides rules are for later only. She isn't reckless, she is tired, tender, and lonely. The line clicks, she listens. The voice that answers is slow, careful, as if handling glass. It knows her name, it asks for a favor. Because true horror never arrives shouting, Hana says the smallest word you can't take back, yes. Hana's days were quiet, the kind of life where routine pressed like soft weight. She worked from her desk near the window, translating lines of Japanese medical brochures into English, sipping black coffee until it cooled into bitterness. Outside, the city staggered on its usual rhythm. Morning delivery trucks reversing into alleys, vendors pulling metal shutters open, children in uniforms walking with umbrellas like tilted sails. Keiji, her brother, kept his own rhythm of late-night elevator repairs, leaving at dusk, returning past midnight with grease on his hands. They crossed paths rarely, except when he left her notes on the counter reminding her to eat. Mrs. Sato, steady in her habits, always fed stray cats around 6 p.m., the sound of tin lids snapping open carrying faintly through thin walls. It was an ordinary life, one that didn't hint at the night the phone rang. Yet Hana had already broken the invisible seal, mentioning Yui's name after midnight. Spirits in Japanese belief don't always charge in, they wait at thresholds, listening, testing. Hana didn't notice at first. She only felt the apartment shift in subtle ways. The mirror near her door fogging, though no one had showered. The faint click of her phone as though a call tried to form. She wrote it off as weather, as static, as nerves. But ordinary life was already bending. And once bent, life rarely straightens back without a cost. Hana's brother Keiji noticed first. Not the phone, not the mirror, but Hana herself. He teased her gently about looking pale, about the way her eyes seemed to dart toward corners during breakfast. He thought she was overworked. Elevator mechanics trusted what they could see. Cables, pulleys, gears. Spirits weren't his concern. Still, he carried his grandmother's rosary beads in his pocket, not for prayer but for luck, a habit that said he respected rules he wouldn't admit aloud. Mrs. Sato noticed too. She told Hana one evening, while folding newspapers for recycling, that she heard whispers traveling the hallway. They weren't arguments, not quite conversations, but strands of speech falling apart into air. Hana laughed politely, thanking her for the incense sticks she always shared. Inside, though, she thought of Yui, the friend who never came home, the missing girl who should have been a memory but now felt like presence. Daily life went on. Hana translated more files. Keiji fixed elevators, sometimes hearing cables hum like low voices. Mrs. Sato fed cats, who began refusing food near Hana's door. Normalcy wore the shape of routine, but it carried a second skin-thin, translucent waiting. In Asian traditions, that waiting is dangerous. A spirit doesn't always storm a household. Sometimes it rides along daily life, hidden in repetition. Hana kept working, ignoring the subtle chills. The phone stayed silent during the day, but each night she grew more aware that ordinary life is only ordinary until midnight. The apartment building itself became a character. Built in the 1970s, it groaned with age. Pipes ticked, wires hissed, elevator belts sang low metallic songs. Keiji once told Hana the building was like a person. Its heartbeat the hum of circuits, its breath the drafts under doors. Most tenants treated these noises as background, easy to tune out, but Hana began to notice timing. At 12:03, the same minute the phone had first rung, the elevator always stopped on the fourth floor, her floor, with no button pressed. The doors slid open to nothing, then they closed again. She told herself it was coincidence, old machinery misbehaving, yet she never dared look directly when the doors opened. Instead, she listened from her apartment, heart quickening with the sound. Mrs. Sato left offerings in the hall, tiny bowls of rice, folded paper charms, and muttered about unsettled spirits searching for anchors. Hana pretended to smile, but she felt herself becoming that anchor. Daylight gave her relief. She cooked noodles, watered plants, worked. The city outside was too loud for whispers, but as night returned, she found herself bracing. Every sound of dripping pipes felt rehearsed, every flicker of the overhead bulb like Morse code. Ordinary life didn't vanish. It remained intact, almost protective, but its edges were being peeled back by something invisible, patient. Hana was beginning to sense that the ghost's language was repetition, and every night repetition deepened. By the second week, Hana stopped denying it. The phone rang once more, this time not anonymous static, but a voice. It was faint, as though spoken through water, yet unmistakably familiar. The voice said her name, paused, then whispered something she couldn't catch before the line cut off. She told herself it was a prank, maybe even a crossed line, but Hana recognized tones, the way consonants softened, the slight delay before the last syllable. It sounded like Yui. Hana remembered the night Yui disappeared. They'd been drinking tea together in a cafe near the station. Yui left early, apologizing for feeling unwell. She was never seen again. The police searched, posters went up, candles flickered at vigils, but silence took her place. For Hana, the guilt was constant. She let Yui walk alone, and now, through a phone line, that same absence was asking to be acknowledged. Keiji tried to brush it off when Hana confessed. He blamed stress. He told her voices linger in memory, not in wires, but even he began to hesitate when the elevator doors kept opening at 12:03, exactly, empty each time. Mrs. Sato suggested a priest, but Hana refused. Something inside her wanted to know, wanted to answer, wanted to listen. Daily life was still there. Groceries, bills, translation deadlines, but every task now felt like preparation, not distraction. Something was building toward her, step by step, night by night, name by name. The ordinary life that once comforted Hana now served as camouflage for dread. Her desk lamp still flickered to life each morning. She still translated endless brochures, yet she no longer trusted the quiet. Her grandmother once told her silence is never empty. It's simply occupied by things we cannot hear. Now Hana understood. She began recording calls, setting her phone beside the landline each night. Most nights produced only static, but once she captured a phrase. It was blurred, but she swore the words resembled, "I'm here." Hearing them sent her trembling but not retreating. Instead she grew compelled. Japanese folklore often warns, spirits linger near those who feel guilty, because guilt is a rope they can pull. Hana felt the rope tightening. Yui's absence was no longer a wound, it was a presence. She started leaving tea at the altar, not just for her grandmother, but for Yui too. Keiji noticed the extra cup, the tired shadows under Hana's eyes, the way she listened too closely to silence. He told her bluntly, "Stop answering. Whatever it isn't her." But Hana wasn't sure. Daily life kept folding into this waiting ritual, and somewhere between fatigue and hope, Hana realized her normal life was ending. What came next would no longer be daily, no longer explainable, no longer safe. Hana marked the calendar without meaning to. 3 nights of static, then one voice. 3 nights of silence, then the elevator's empty arrival. Patterns soothe humans and instruct ghosts. Both lean on repetition. Escalation started through smell. At 12:03, an odor of wet iron, like coins rubbed between fingers, drifted beneath her door. The cats refused the hallway entirely. Salt on the altar clumped into a crust that looked thumb-pressed. She replaced it, swept, opened the window, and the smell kept returning. The building listened back. Condensation gathered on the intercom grill, beating like breath. The elevator arrived, opened, exhaled cool air, and shut on nothing. Charms on Mrs. Sato's lintel curled at the corners as though heated by a sun. Hana kept working. That was her defense. She translated phrases about clean rooms, hospice visits, respectful exits. Her hearing sharpened. She learned the difference between the compressor in the fridge and the transformer in the hall lamp. She heard the elevator's belt skip half a tooth. She began anticipating the phone by the way the handset cord twitched before it rang, as if sound needed to stretch its legs first. Keiji worked late, leaving a note she filed without reading. Mrs. Sato watered the spider plant and hummed sutras. Hana proofread a paragraph, paused, and realized escalation had changed channels. The call didn't come through the landline. It threaded through her laptop fan, rode noise gate, and entered headphones. Shape of her name formed like breath across glass there. Hana tested reality the way technicians test circuits. Isolate, observe, repeat. She unplugged the landline at dusk, muted laptop inputs, cleared caches. At 12:03, the elevator still arrived. The intercom lit for a unit without visitors. Air carried a damp chill, as though weather leaked from a stairwell window no one had opened. She stood at the peephole and watched the hallway lengthen. Yet this was different. The floor numbers painted by the lift looked slightly rearranged, as if a hand had nudged them out of order and back again. Cat's paw prints appeared in dust, leading nowhere. She checked recordings the next morning. The waveform looked ordinary, but when she boosted gain, a low band bloomed like a seabed shelf, carrying faint phonemes that almost formed her name. Inside the building's hush, a priest might say approach, an engineer might say artifact. Hana called it unavoidable. She answered nothing that night, but awareness answered for her. A current ran through habits. Cup down, lamp off, lock checked, breath held, then the phone light flickered. Keiji messaged that he'd be on site past midnight. A high-rise's lift was stalling between floors. She pictured him in a humming shaft, considering cables, never considering ghosts. Mrs. Sato slid a packet of salt under Hana's door. The paper felt warm. Hana poured a line across the threshold. The grains arranged themselves irregularly, like characters half-formed and unwilling to finish. Outside, rain began. A patient drumming that sounded less like weather and more like tapping fingernails, counting the minutes she had left to ignore this. Inside, the fan paused, resumed, as if listening for her reply. The first physical sign arrived as something small enough to ignore. On Tuesday, Hana found a strand of hair on the landline cradle, longer than her own, damp as if lifted from rain. She cleaned the receiver, washed her hands, and the scent of wet iron returned, closer. At 12:03, the elevator opened again. She faced the door and held her breath. Cold pooled at her ankles like shadow made liquid. The light inside the car flickered once, twice, then steadied like a throat clearing. The intercom crackled. Not the buzzer, just the speaker, offering a room tone, not the building's. Within that tone, a rhythm appeared, the same spacing as her name. Mrs. Sato's lock turned down the hall, a mark that made Hana move. She opened her door. The corridor smelled of laundry, starch, and incense. No one stood there, yet the spider plant beside Mrs. Sato's mat trembled as if brushed by a passing sleeve. Hana shut her door again, steadying her hands. Her laptop screen woke by itself. The cursor pulsed in a search bar. She refused to type. She listened. The hum aligned with the relay. In another part of the city, Keiji's stalled car moved. He texted that he'd ride the cab home. Hana read the message twice, grateful for ordinary complication. Then the building offered a reply. The elevator stopped on 4 and stayed. The doors did not open. The hum became a tone, not loud but focused like presence choosing a doorway. That night Hana accepted that something wanted entry and began with courtesy. She swept from the doorway inward, salted the threshold, and placed fresh tea at the altar beside her grandmother's photo. She bowed to align herself with the idea of boundaries. Politeness matters, even with the dead. At 12:03, the elevator arrived and held. The intercom emitted a fine hiss, like steam leaving a kettle. The phone didn't ring. Instead, the building asked in other ways. A gentle knocking sounded from inside the kitchen wall. 5 taps spaced like a breath exercise. Her voice didn't answer. Her body did. Her pulse matched the pattern without permission. She steadied herself and recited a rhyme her grandmother used for calming rooms, imagining the syllables as stitches closing fabric. The temperature fell. The tea clouded. Her recording app caught a smear of sound, a shape almost forming a word resembling help. Hana had promised herself not to dramatize this. She avoided news about missing persons now. She refused forums and rumors. Yet the requests kept arriving quietly. In that same hour, Keiji's cab slowed near the harbor as emergency vehicles blocked a lane. He smelled the same wet iron and thought of lift cables. Cats wailed in the alley and then stopped together as if cued. The elevator on 4 opened at last. The car was empty. The light inside steadied. The air in the corridor felt briefly grateful, then expectant again. Somewhere below, water knocked in pipes like distant footsteps approaching. Hana decided the favor, whatever it was, would be small. Acknowledgement. She wrote Yui's name on a slip of paper, folded it into a protective knot, and set it beside the tea. She spoke only inside her head, promising to listen. The building answered with coordination. The intercom light glowed. The elevator arrived. The fan paused. The refrigerator clicked, and the salt held. Her phone displayed a missed call with no number at 12:03, though the landline remained unplugged. The voicemail contained only the sound of walking on wet tile, shoe squeaks, a distant chime, and something like an automated announcement blurred into water. She replayed it with headphones, marking details the way translators mark idioms. The chime matched the elevator in her building, but the echo felt larger, like a station. The footsteps were uneven, favoring the left, like Yui's gait after an old ankle sprain. A smell of sea air slipped beneath her door, wrong for a rain-soaked night. She opened the peephole and saw the corridor brighten 2 shades like a camera lifting gain. No figures moved, yet the spider plant leaned sharply toward her door as if drawn. She shut her eyes and drew a circle on her knee with a fingertip to anchor herself. When she looked again, the intercom showed the outside feed. Puddles on the pavement below reflected signage backward. A word repeated across 3 frames, fractured by ripples, arranging itself into a direction then a sentence. Act 2 had chosen its map. The word in the pavement reflection appeared over 3 frames, bent by ripples, insisting itself into a direction rather than a sentence. Minato, harbor. Hana knew the station. Minato Dori, where the line cut near the water, and tiled corridors held the sea's breath after rain. She tried to dismiss it as coincidence, a mind making shapes, but the building synchronized again, intercom glow, elevator pause, fan held at a single pitch like a tuning fork. At 12:03, the doors opened on 4 and did not close. Cold air pressed the threshold, polite but patient. This was an invitation with rules. In many Japanese households, a spirit that cannot return home is guided, not dragged. You light away, name once, never thrice, offer salt, carry water, and keep your own boundaries intact. Hana prepared. She placed a second cup of tea, pinched fresh salt, slipped her grandmother's tiny bell into her pocket, and folded Yui's name into another protective knot. She texted Keiji, only that she was awake. She texted Mrs. Sato a thank you for the charms. She opened her door and stood in the corridor, not stepping across the salt, and said, only inside her head, that she would go where the reflection pointed. The elevator accepted at once, car waiting like a still lung. Hana stepped in, touching the bell to the rail. The doors closed gently, as though closing a lid over a word. The descent felt less mechanical and more like a corridor narrowing to a necessary end. Basement level smelled of detergent and wet concrete. The machine room throbbed behind a locked steel door. On a hook hung the emergency flashlight, which Keiji had insisted Hana keep charged. She took it. The intercom speaker on the cinderblock wall gave a whisper of dry sound, bare voltage, a ghostly throat clearing. Above her the car lingered. Below, a service corridor led to a maintenance exit that opened near the station underpass. She had walked it before with Keiji on inspection days. Tonight the path felt elongated, as if each fluorescent tube were a bead on an unending string. She kept the bell in her hand, and the thought steady in her body. I'm guiding, not inviting. The rules mattered. At the maintenance door she paused, pinched salt onto the sill, and bowed her head just enough to show respect without surrender. When she pushed the bar, cool rain breathed in. The night held the metallic quiet of emptied streets after a storm. Across the lane, the station's side entrance was chained but not locked. A notice flapped, apologizing for water damage. Hannah ducked through, angling the flashlight toward the tile. The recorded voicemail had contained wet footsteps and a distant chime. Here the chime repeated from a closed ticket gate beyond. Not loud but steady. The tiles were glossy with condensation. Her shoes squeaked, right, left, right, echoing the uneven rhythm she remembered from Yui's healing ankle. She followed the echo, not the sound, because echoes carry truth long after noise ends. The bell in her palm warmed. At the base of a stairwell sealed by tape, water still lingered in a shallow pool. The flashlight found a scum line marking last week's higher flood. Against the wall, high and half hidden behind a bent caution sign, a cluster of lost and found tags hung from a wire hook. Umbrellas, a scarf, a single glove, and a clear phone pouch with a green lanyard knotted in Yui's careless way. Hana's throat tightened, but she kept to the rules, acknowledgement before attachment. She set the bell against the concrete and tapped it with a nail so lightly it spoke a single silver syllable. Then she stepped back, because respect is a distance. The smell of wet iron thickened. From the flooded step rose the softest suggestion of breath, the way steam moves off cooling rice. It wasn't dramatic, it was domestic, reluctant to trouble anyone. Yui had always apologized for everything. Hana spoke nothing aloud. She arranged salt in a small ring on the dry tile and placed the folded paper with Yui's name inside it, a not quite a fuda that any grandmother would accept in a pinch. She uncapped a bottle of water and poured a line toward the pool, a corridor for return. The station answered by giving back what it had kept. In the water's sheen, letters assembled again. Not Minato now, but a truncated K, as if the place were trying to complete a name it didn't fully own. Keiji. The thought arrived like a mechanical brake catching. Somewhere above ground, her brother was riding home past this place, ignorant of the pull underneath. The bell trembled without Hana's hand. Hana called Keiji with fingers that wanted to shake but didn't. She told him only this: come to Minatodori side entrance maintenance door, now. He arrived 15 minutes later, cab idling, collar wet. He began with questions a mechanic would ask, why she was below grade, why the door was unsealed, but the station's hush edited him. He saw the pouch. He saw the salt ring. He heard water tapping a stair like counting. He listened like a boy at a shrine, not an engineer in a drift. Keiji crouched and lifted the pouch gently. Inside, a cracked phone pressed against fogged plastic, moisture sealed in like a tiny weather. The green lanyard smelled faintly of Yui's citrus shampoo. Keiji looked at Hana and understood enough. They worked without theater. He logged the find with station security. She finished her simple guidance. The bell rang once, twice, a thanks more than a summons. The pool rippled in an inward drawing circle and settled, its sheen losing that strange reflective intelligence that had spelled directions. For ordinary authorities, the sequence would become clear in the coming days. After the storm, a slip on slick tile, a fall into floodwater, a current that pinned and kept. It was not dramatic. It was indifferent and thorough. Hidden deaths are often like that, tidy to the world, untidy to the ones who loved. Keiji rested the pouch on the folded paper within the salt ring, not breaking the circle. He whispered nothing. He apologized with his posture. The elevator mechanic kept a boundary the priest would have approved. They left the station before dawn, carrying only what the living could carry: a record of the find, a pouch to be passed through proper hands, a knowledge that the favor asked had been something kinder than vengeance. Back at the building, Mrs. Sato was already at her door with incense. She read the night on their faces the way weathered people rid tides. She said nothing, only placed an extra stick beside Hana's altar and knocked lightly on the door frame, a rhythm that matched the night's taps in gentler time. At 12 or 3 the next night, the elevator did not arrive. The intercom stayed dark. The fan hummed ordinary. The salt at the threshold remained crisp, no clumping thumb. Hana poured tea for her grandmother, and one last cup for Yui, and this time the steam rose straight, not side-seeking. When she rang the bell, the tone hung in the room without catching on anything unseen. The voicemail remained on her phone, but its wet footsteps had become just that, recorded steps in a place where a friend had walked. The haunting eased not with an exorcism, but with a message delivered, a direction read, a boundary kept. In the days that followed, the police called, thanked, and spoke practical words. Posters came down, candles burned one last evening and were snuffed. Yui's name stayed on Hana's altar, because remembering is not inviting, it is tending. Ordinary life returned, but it carried a pledge. If the dead call softly, you answer with guidance, not welcome with respect, not surrender. The favor had been simple, be found. In Asia, ghost stories rarely separate belief from daily life. What Hana experienced isn't told as a fantasy, it is shared as a warning. In Japan, names are believed to carry weight. To speak a missing person's name after midnight is not only remembrance, it is recognition. Recognition is attention, and in folklore, attention is a thread spirits can pull. This is why Hana's midnight post, though innocent, became an open door. The superstition of Ushimitsu Doke, the ox hour between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. is considered the thinnest boundary between living and dead. But the truth is, boundaries weaken any time routine is broken by yearning. Hana's guilt, her longing to hear Yui's voice, created the condition for a call that wasn't carried by wires at all. In Japanese belief, spirits are not always dramatic. They are subtle, patient, leaning into repetition until the living notice. That's what happened here. 3 nights of silence, 1 night of sound, a pattern, a rhythm. To many, this is the sign not of imagination, but of a spirit asking quietly to be guided home. The act of leaving tea, salt, and water is not exorcism, it is etiquette, and etiquette, even with the dead, has power. Why tea, salt, and water? These items carry symbolic meaning across Japanese households. Tea is hospitality. It is the drink you offer guests, human or otherwise, to acknowledge presence. Salt is purity. It is sprinkled at shrine entrances, in sumo rings, even outside restaurants, to cleanse what passes. Water is passage. In Shinto and Buddhist rituals, water connects this world with the other, flowing between boundaries. When Hana placed these items, she wasn't casting a spell. She was observing politeness, and in Asian traditions, politeness is more than social, it is spiritual. Spirits that linger are thought to remain because they feel ignored, abandoned, or uncertain of the way back. Offering tea says, you are noticed. Salt says, you may pass cleanly. Water says, here is the road. These gestures are small, but folklore insists they matter. Because the dead are not strangers, they are neighbors who have slipped into a different street, waiting for someone to acknowledge their presence. Hana's actions align with what Japanese families quietly continue to do every Obon season, prepare a path for souls to visit, and then to return. It is not about power, it is about courtesy. The station setting carries its own resonance. In modern Japan, train stations are common sites for ghost stories. Why? Because they are liminal spaces, thresholds. A train station is not a destination, it is a passage point. Spirits are thought to linger where transitions occur. Riverbanks, tunnels, bridges, corridors, and platforms. Folklore collects many accounts of footsteps heard in locked stations after hours, of apparitions glimpsed near shuttered ticket gates. These tales may sound modern, but their logic is ancient. Travelers, whether of the living or the dead, pause in such places, uncertain of direction. In the case of Hana's story, Minato Station became both a literal flood site and a symbolic waiting room. Yui's presence was not demanding vengeance, it was simply caught in the in-between, waiting for acknowledgement. This aligns with countless Asian traditions, where lost souls are described as hungry or wandering, not because they are violent, but because they are lost. In Japanese Buddhist language, they are gaki, hungry spirits, who cannot find satisfaction without guidance. The echo of Yui's footsteps, the voicemail of water and announcements, was less a haunting and more a cry for direction. And when Hana and Keiji responded with offerings and respect, the haunting shifted into release. We should pause here on guilt, because it is one of the most powerful forces in Asian ghost lore. The living often become tethered to the dead, not by love alone, but by regret. Hana felt guilty for letting Yui leave alone that night. That guilt became a rope. Spirits, it is said, pull on ropes made of memory. When someone cannot let go, the boundary weakens. This is why in Japan and other parts of Asia, memorial services are as much for the living as for the dead. They allow survivors to cut or ease the rope, to acknowledge what has happened, and grant the spirit freedom. Without this, guilt festers and spirits are thought to hover. Hana's story illustrates this perfectly. The calls did not begin until after her midnight post, a guilty plea for contact. Once she acknowledged Yui through ritual, the rope loosened, the smell of iron faded, the elevator returned to routine. In this way, the haunting was resolved not with a banishment, but with a reconciliation, and this reflects something broader. Many Asian ghost stories are not about horror in the Western sense. They are about unfinished business, about what happens when grief has not been properly voiced, and when the living forget their obligations to remember. So what do we take from this story? That not all hauntings are attacks, some are requests. In Japan, and across Asia, the belief persists that the dead are never far, especially when forgotten, drowned, or lost in liminal spaces. They do not always shout, they whisper. They move in repetition, in timing, in subtle disruptions of the ordinary. They wait to be acknowledged. For non-Asian viewers, think of it this way. In many cultures, remembering the dead is about closure. In Asia, it is also about maintenance. You do not close a door forever. You tend it. You keep the altar fresh. You bow at the grave. You avoid calling names at midnight, not because ghosts are unreal, but because attention itself is a form of invitation. Hana's story illustrates that haunting is less about terror than it is about unfinished connection. She did not drive the spirit away, she guided it home. That guidance ended the haunting, but it also left her with a lesson. Respect the rules, honor the boundaries, and never forget that silence is not empty. It listens, always. And when it speaks, the dead may not be demanding. They may only be asking you to remember. Some stories end with discovery, others with silence. Hana's story ended with both. The phone stopped ringing, the elevator returned to its ordinary rhythm, and the smell of wet iron faded. Yet she still keeps Yui's name on the altar, because in Japan and across Asia, remembrance is not dangerous. Forgetting is. Think about the small rules hidden in this story. Don't say a lost name after midnight. Don't answer a call that doesn't belong to the living. Don't ignore subtle patterns that repeat in the dark. They sound like folklore, but folklore has teeth. Every superstition was born from someone's experience, passed down because ignoring it once left a mark. So the question is this: what do you believe really happened that night? Was it Hana's guilt taking form in sounds and smells, or was it truly Yui reaching across the boundary, waiting in the station for someone to bring her home? If your phone rang after midnight tonight, and the voice on the other end whispered your name, would you answer? Thank you for staying with us through this story here on Paranormal Asia. As you close this video, listen carefully to the silence around you. If it feels heavier than usual, maybe you've been noticed. Goodbye for now, and when the next night arrives, another story will already be waiting for you.